His name is a byword for foolish greed and fantastic wealth. According to legend, he yearned to be the richest man in the ancient world, and it brought him only misery. But was King Midas, the man who turned everything he touched to gold, just a myth? Or was this storybook king, the man behind the Midas Touch, for real? In 1957, a spectacular discovery was made on a desolate plain in central Turkey. It would go to the heart of the ancient world and of the Midas legend. Buried deep in a huge mound was the skeleton of what seemed to be a powerful ruler.
It was exciting because of the beautiful stuff that he had. Furniture, collapsed tables, it was gorgeous.
The legend began to be explored. And now an astonishing picture is emerging of a long-lost and fabulously rich civilization, of brilliantly successful kings who built a city finer in its time than anything in Greece itself, and of a mysterious land where the Midas touch began and where it is finally being unraveled. As early as 650 BC, Greek poets began to use the name of Midas to stand for great wealth. And then, over the coming centuries, Greek plays and Roman verse built up the myths we are familiar with today. The greatest of these is the tale of Midas's golden touch.
Midas had saved the life of a servant of Dionysus, the god of wine. In return, he asked Dionysus for one favor. Grant that whatsoever I may touch with my body may be turned to yellow gold. Dionysus granted him his wish, but no sooner had Midas started to revel in his new talent than he fell into despair. For whatever he touched did at once turn to gold. Soon Midas found himself starving, and he pleaded for help. Have mercy, I pray thee. Save me from this curse that seemed so fair. Dionysus was generous and told Midas that he could return to his old self once he had bathed in the river Pactolus, whose sands have been golden ever since.
But asking for the golden touch was not Midas's only act of folly. There was a second myth about him, every bit as mocking as the first.
Midas was asked to judge whose music was the more beautiful, Apollo's or Pan's. Midas chose Pan. Then Apollo angrily said to Midas, "You will have ears to match the mind you have in judging." And with these words, he caused him to have ass's ears.
But as well as the Midas of myth, there was a Midas who was mentioned by ancient historians as a real person. The references are few and tantalizing, and they seem to paint a very different picture from the mythical fool. Instead, they talk about a mighty king who ruled part of modern Turkey, then called Phrygia, around 700 BC, and had his court in a city called Gordion. This King Midas of history first crops up in tablets written in the late 8th century BC by the king of Assyria, Phrygia's neighbor to the east.
A messenger of Midas the Phrygian has come to me. This is extremely good. The Phrygian has given us his word and become our ally.
Then in the 5th century BC, the Greek historian Herodotus also mentions Midas.
Midas, king of Phrygia, dedicated his royal throne to the oracle at Delphi. And this indeed is a marvel to see.
These writings seem to hint at a sophisticated and diplomatic king, keen to make alliances with his neighbors. But then a later Greek writer suggested it all ended in a horrible death.
The Cimmerians burst into Phrygia when, according to report, Midas came to his death by drinking bull's blood.
As the ancient world gave way to the modern, these mentions were so small that no one could be sure Midas had really existed. After all, ancient historians were notoriously unreliable. Herodotus himself was known not only as the father of history, but also the father of lies. And there was no physical evidence to go on. No Phrygian objects of the period, no remains you could see and touch. So what was the truth? Did the Midas of myth have anything to do with a real person called Midas? The mystery would last for nearly 2,000 years, until a lone British Army officer stumbled on an astounding sight he could scarcely believe.